All right, Paul Tasner, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so I'd love if we could just start off, if you could give people kind of just a foundation to what was life like for little Paul growing up.
uh, um, the that's a good question. I guess I should attempt to give the short version since we're somewhat limited. I grew up in a kind of a blue collar, or some of my more cynical uh, friends and family would say blue/orange collar.
Huh.
I had kind of a colorful family. I guess colorful is the
Yeah.
word. Colorful is the word you use when you don't want to use the legal terms.
Yeah.
uh, I, I had a really modest background. My dad was a letter carrier. My mom was a clerk in a store. Um, Grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Um,
Nice.
Back in the 50s and 60s. Um, I guess it was pretty exciting time to be growing up. I keep hearing my peers tell me that. I keep hearing everyone say,
Yeah.
that was really a pretty special time. Um, and I'm beginning to believe that more and more. Um, I, I wasn't very introspective. I was good in math and science. I studied engineering.
Hmm.
I studied mathematics in graduate school, but I wasn't very introspective about what I wanted to do with my life. I
Right.
figured you should do what you're good at, or some kind of message like that. Not very profound, and my parents were not very sophisticated about educate. I mean, they wanted their kids to get an education, but we didn't have many college graduates in our family, and
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot of sophistication around picking your career. I mean, my father was glad to have a job,
Yeah.
um, and
Okay. So when you went to college, then you went for engineering, and your whole sort of ideology behind that was I'm good at math and science. Math and science, you put them together, you have engineering. So,
I mean, yeah, it sounds so simplistic, but I think that was kind of it, to be honest.
yeah.
Um, and it wasn't until I finished school that I really started to question what I wanted to do with my life. I was really beginning to formulate some ideas, but I still didn't have a handle on it by no
Yeah.
means. Um, I was offered a job by my dad's youngest brother. He was kind of the success story in the family, rags to riches guy.
Hmm.
He was a fighter pilot in World War II. He was one of those bigger than life type guys.
Yeah.
Um, and he had a very successful business, and he had no sons, just daughters, and they weren't really interested in his business. He had a
Yeah.
manufacturing company. Um, and he was very sick by this time. He was a 3 pack a day smoker, had emphysema.
Goodness.
So I went to visit him, and by the time the weekend was over, he had offered me a job. Um, I didn't have anything better, and the salary was attractive. He was a pretty charismatic guy,
Right.
and I said yes. And I went to work for him. I didn't really care much for his style of management, but I didn't have
Yeah.
much to compare it with. Um, he was no longer my uncle now. He was my boss, and
Right.
he was much better as an uncle, I'll tell you that.
That's hilarious.
But I like the work. I like the work. It did suit me. And um, when his health really took a turn for the worst, and he decided to shut down his business, I found work with one of our clients.
Hmm.
And I had a good background for it, and they knew me through my work with my uncle, and that started me kind of on a more corporate career.
Right.
So I got involved in manufacturing and packaging for consumer goods.
Gotcha. And
Um,
so the job with your uncle, then that was your first quote unquote, that was your first job out of college, basically.
my first serious job, I
Right.
put myself through school with many jobs.
Yeah.
And they even increasingly better jobs, but they were not,
Yeah.
but they were only a means to an end. Um, I had a job as an editor for a science magazine. I mean, that's a lot better
Nice.
than that's a lot better than delivering papers and stuff. But
Yeah.
it wasn't really a career for me, but it paid some of the bills and things like that. But yeah, this was my really first serious salary, serious job, etc.
Right. I guess one thing I would be curious is like, let's say you could go back to that stage of your life. Like, would you
Yeah,
have given yourself any advice as far as like, hey, you're about to go into your career or kind of your like professional next chapter of your life? This is what I would recommend to do or to not do. Would you have any things that you'd maybe go back and tell yourself?
yeah, it's a good question considering your audience, of course. God, there's also so many things I would have done differently too. I mean, as harsh as it may sound, I would never have gone to work for my uncle.
Hmm.
I don't. I guess my first words of wisdom might be, try not to work for your family. I mean, it's pretty rare when it works out. I mean, I've been working for 50 years now. I can count on one hand the number of family organizations that seem to be successful,
Hmm.
functional, where people respect each other. It's usually quite the opposite. They're really dysfunctional. You know, the other employees are uncomfortable being around them, and I would not have gone to work for my family. But even
Interesting.
more so, I would have given much more thought to my career. I mean, I took this job because he offered it to me at the end of a weekend,
Yeah.
and because I had nothing better lined up. That's not what I would call planning. I
Yeah.
think younger people today would just laugh at that. Like they know that they have to plan their careers. They would never do something that, you
Yeah,
know,
well, I think it's interesting though because when you graduate, there's such a weight of everyone around you. Oh, you're going into the real world. You're going into this next phase. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like you're so pressured to have an answer that I think even today people still fall into that thing of, oh, I got this offer. I'm going to go do this because now I can say I have a job or I'm
yeah,
doing something with my life or look at me. But I think like you're saying, I think if you finish school, as maybe easier said than done, but give yourself a couple months to really assess what do I want to do? What are my options? Maybe get a couple different offers. Like you really should give yourself you should allow yourself to look at different options because
I,
more,
I,
yeah,
I would go back. I would go back and say you should have been thinking about this throughout your, maybe not during your freshman year, but you should have been thinking about this throughout your college career. So by the time you graduated, you know
yeah,
where you want to land. That isn't to say if you land in the wrong place, you make the best of it, and sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. It's
yeah,
really up to you. Even in my case, I mean, I had a dreadful experience working for my uncle. I mean, really dreadful.
hmm,
But I guess you could call it the proverbial blessing in disguise. It all worked out in the end, and landed a good job with one of our clients. But that's no plan. That's just
yeah,
trying to make the best of a bad situation.
yeah,
Yeah, I think today's graduates have been given a lot of thought to what they want to do. Um, and for me, if I had to go back and think about it, um, I took that job because I didn't have anything better lined up, and
right,
yeah, the salary was attractive. He waved that in front of me, and that got me.
yeah,
But I think today the question for me might have been better put as, what kind of an organization do you want to work for? Or, if you do want to work in, a big, big, big bureaucracy, why? I mean, that might be a great idea, but what's your plan? I mean, is it because you feel most comfortable in a big
right,
bureaucracy, or is it you want to get some training and then move into something smaller? I mean, have that kind of a plan. I know personally now, I'm not suited to large organizations. I'm just not. I
Yeah.
think they're here. I
Yeah.
don't want to get negative on. They're
Mixed
just
feelings.
they move with the speed of a glacier. They
Yeah, they do.
you spend especially if you move up the ladder a little bit, as I was fortunate to do. You spend half your time in meetings, and you spend half
Yeah.
your time kind of in meetings because you're supposed to be in them, not because
Yeah.
they're valuable. It's just not a good use of time. And still they're successful, but
Yeah.
which is unbelievable. The amount
Yeah.
of the amount of waste and time and energy that is not spent toward your goal, and they're still successful to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Um, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess I would be curious and kind of in that same train of thought. So, you got the job with your uncle. Eventually it led to the next thing. And then ultimately it led to this 40-year career where you were, like you said, like very successful. You were able to work your way up and be in some of like the top positions in some of these companies. Um, and I guess a question I would have for you is like, let's say someone they've asked themselves these questions of what do I really want, or why am I really going to go to one of these companies, and they found themselves now working for a company. What advice would you give to those people on how they can maybe work their way up quicker in the quote unquote chain of command, or within a company?
Yeah. Um, well, it depends on what their goals are. I mean, if their goal is truly to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak,
Yeah.
um, I'd be the last one to give advice because I was dreadful at that. I fell into some fortunate situations. I never got out of the solid middle management when I worked for a large company. I was smack dab in middle management, and I don't think I was going to get much higher than that.
Hmm.
My mindset, I wasn't cut out for it. My mindset, the guys and women that really climbed those ladders, they were willing to do just about anything to climb the ladder,
Yeah.
and I wasn't. I really wasn't. So,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
don't
you knew
want.
what you wanted, so and you didn't
I,
want to do
I
that, so
didn't.
that's perfectly
I
fine.
wasn't built that way. I mean, I just wasn't built that way. Um, and I didn't admire or respect them, to be honest with you. That's when I realized that this is not the right this is not the right environment for me. A much smaller company, or better yet, even something entrepreneurial would really be better for me.
Yeah.
So
When did you have that realization that, the big company is not my style?
my first job was with a large company, very large, and I was there 15 years. Um,
Hmm.
and I think after 5 years, I started thinking that way. And in the last 5 years, I was really thinking that way,
Yeah.
um, because my my next job wasn't a job. I did some
Yeah.
consulting for the next 6 years.
Yeah.
I was so gun shy on working in corporate America, I decided to just try my hand at consulting.
Right.
I had,
So,
I had 15 years of experience and a good reputation, and it seemed to suit me.
yeah. So, one thing I'm curious that you said there. So, you said you were there 15 years, and the first 5 years, you realized maybe like at the end of the 5 year, you
Yes,
realized big companies aren't quite my thing. Yet, you stayed there for another 10 years.
yes, exactly.
So, why'd you stay?
Um, Excellent question. The so-called golden handcuffs. I was paid very well.
Yeah.
I I,
Comfortable.
ha- I had a family, a growing family, a mortgage.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, I had I had colleagues, many colleagues that I really enjoyed working
Yeah.
with, and that helped. Um, I I I was also in a corner of the company where I was kind of left alone to do my thing. So I mean, I wasn't gonna get to the top of the ladder, but I had a relatively comfortable role where I was able to do my own thing, and well respected outside and inside the company
Right.
in that small little niche, of course.
Yeah.
So my situation wasn't intolerable.
Right.
And I had good bosses
Yeah.
until the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Then I landed a boss that was from hell, and
Uh-oh.
that, that just made everything horrible. So
Yeah. If you were to go back, would you, say I would have left at year 5 when I had that kind of gut realization, or would you say maybe, staying the extra 10 years led to some pretty good things?
no, I think you nailed it. I think 5 years would have been more than enough in terms of experience
Hmm,
um,
that's true.
and I do. I mean, honestly, when I launched my own business, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
um, it was fabulous. I mean, something
Yeah.
one might say I should have done ages ago. But the truth is, I shouldn't have done it ages ago. I needed to have this experience,
Totally.
Um, but I didn't necessarily need 40 years of this experience.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it's
I do think there's some real value in working in another organization, you know, uh, seeing how the quote business world operates. There's some real value in doing that before you launch your own business.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I kind of think about hearing your story here is like there's this one story of this like little kid. He's walking along the street with his mom, walking down the street, and he sees this dog on the porch with like this man that's just like sitting in his rocking chair. He's got his dog, and the kid comes up to pet the dog and notices there's a nail, like the dog's paws on a nail. And the kid asks, he's like, "Oh, well, why isn't he moving?" And the owner goes, "Well, it just doesn't hurt bad enough, you know."
Oh,
And it,
God.
yeah, and it's like I think it's a big thing that sometimes we find ourselves in a position, and we start to justify, well, I'm here and this is good and that's good, and it doesn't quote unquote hurt bad enough, so I'll just stay there. But I think if people can take a beautiful lesson from your life, um, yeah, like I think you said it beautifully. 5 years was plenty enough experience, and if you do have that kind of gut reaction of maybe I'm not supposed to keep doing this, like trust that gut feeling. And whether you leave immediately or not, like look for a different option, look for maybe what else feels like it's pulling you a little bit more. And at the end of the day, know that like we as humans are intelligent beings, and more likely than not you're going to find yourself on your feet, right? If you say I'm feeling called to do something else and you jump out of that plane, we're smart humans. You'll build a parachute at some point. You won't hit the ground, and you'll get back up, and then you can create a life where you do wake up saying, "Man, I'm really excited and happy now that I'm doing what I'm doing today because I did take that leap."
Correct, correct. And I think as I look back, I had no real role models, people before me, whether they were friends or family,
Yeah,
who worked in quote corporate America. I had no one really giving me advice along those lines. Um, I think part of it was yeah, I had financial obligations. There's no question about that. But truth be told, I could have quit. My wife was 100% behind me
yeah,
whenever I quit.
yeah.
I can't really lay that blame on the family situation.
Right. Hmm.
Um, in fact, I was probably a bad role model for my kids. I mean, I clearly didn't like my work,
Hmm.
especially those last 5 years. Uh, and that really motivated me to make a change. But I think there was a self confidence issue in terms of me, and I don't know how to explain that. I
Yeah.
was a smart guy with a good education and a good resume by that point. There's no reason I shouldn't have taken a leap. No
Right.
reason at all,
Yeah, you had all the backing.
except my own self confidence. And Unfortunately, it took me my whole career to develop the the risk taking behavior that I needed to take to launch my own business.
Right. So
I wish I'd done it sooner.
yeah, so let's jump forward to that then. So,
Yeah.
you're 40 years in kind of the corporate world, you're doing this, and one day, if I read correctly, you get called into a meeting. Long story short, this meeting is your exit interview. And one of the things that I would love to hear from you, um, that from doing some of my research, sounds like you did this in a pretty quick and resourceful way, is, you had the exit interview, get laid off. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that place of like being problem oriented, right? Oh, I don't have a job. I don't have this. I don't have that. And it seems like rather quickly you went from problem mode into solution mode of, okay, this is what happened. What is next? And that's when I think you went into some of the consulting stuff. So I'm curious if you can just walk us through like what was going through your head throughout that process. As 40 years you're doing this, you have this exit interview, and kind of fill us in from there.
Yes. I think my mindset is important here because no, I wasn't really prepared to get the heave ho.
Yeah.
But that was probably naive on my part. I mean, that last job that I had, we had a new CEO had come in earlier in the year. The old CEO was the gentleman that had hired me years before that, and I just adored him. He was just an
Yeah.
amazing individual. So the new CEO, there was no way he could live up to that. And frankly, he didn't even come close to living up to it. He was quite dreadful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't think I hid that as best as I could.
Yeah.
So I should have known that the door was waiting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But still, I was surprised. Someone comes up to you late on a Friday afternoon and um, asks what you're doing, and I said, "Oh, I'm just out the door. I'm going to meet my wife for dinner. Hey, could you just jump in this room for a moment for a meeting?" And my answer was, "No, I really don't have the time."
Huh.
And then the voice changed. "You need to come to this meeting."
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what's this all about? And I found out that I was being let go. But I will tell you this, and the head of HR, who was a lovely woman, shared with me, and she was at the meeting. I had an apple in my hand. I skipped lunch and I was starving, so
Huh.
I ate my apple throughout my exit interview, and she said to me, "Paul, you're eating an apple." I said, "Yeah, I'm hungry." And she said, "But this is your exit interview. You seem quite comfortable, at least comfortable enough to eat your apple."
Yeah.
And I thought about that afterwards too. I was comfortable. I mean, unconsciously, I was
Yeah.
comfortable. I must have expected it at some point. I must have welcomed it at some point
Yeah. You're
because
ready for the
I
next thing.
was not. I was not devastated. In fact,
Yeah.
I met my wife and another couple, and we had dinner. And I told them that I was just fired. They thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. And I said, "No, I'm deadly serious." And then they went into, "Oh, are you okay?" mode. And I said, "Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine. Let's get some beers."
Yeah.
So I think I did welcome it, to be honest, and
Yeah.
and I wasn't devastated. And as you said, it was an easier mindset to make plans. I wasn't,
Right.
gnashing my teeth and biting my nails. So my plan was to go back and do some consulting because I had a great network, and now I had 40 years of experience.
Yeah.
Um, it didn't feel like something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but I did need to earn. I did need to generate some
Right.
revenue. So I did that, and while I was doing that, this is the time to start a business. If it's
Yeah.
not now, it'll be never. And that's when I started sifting through information, things I heard, things I saw, you know, conferences that I went to. I was making up my mind, and little by little by little, I kind of refined it down uh, to what my business is today. But it wasn't. They say that aha moment.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. I mean, it was a slow, organic grind,
Yeah.
and that finally spit out an answer at the end. It took me 2 years to
Yeah.
kind of,
Really?
yeah, it took 2 years to kind of land on what I really wanted to do.
Right. And so ultimately this brought you to Pulpworks, right?
Yes, yes,
Which is what you're doing now. And
yes.
one of the things that I read about you, that I would love to hear you expand upon a little bit is just the amount of like fulfillment and passion that you have doing what you're doing now is like you is some of the most you've had in your professional life, just like doing some of the stuff that's really lighting you up. And I'd be curious if you could expand on like what do you feel it is that brings that to you, the
Yeah.
fulfillment, the passion, the just all of that.
I think, and it is. You're absolutely right, and you must have come across that in some of the stuff you read. It is. This is the most rewarding and challenging work of my life,
Yeah.
and I've had good jobs. I mean, I've had good jobs that were rewarding and challenging, but nothing holds a candle to this. And I think the answer has got to be, not is, has got to be the fact that it's mine.
Mm.
I created this myself.
Yeah.
I take, because to be honest with you, the work I do is really very similar to the work I've done all my life. I'm still in that same groove about manufacturing and consumer packaging. I wasn't as passionate about the environment as I am today, back in the day, but then nobody was really.
Right.
I mean, with the,
Right. The
aside from,
world's moved in that direction.
yes. So it's got to be the ownership, the fulfillment that you feel from starting something and growing it, and um,
Yeah.
that just makes me feel fantastic, fantastic.
I I love that.
So
So
for your audience,
yeah,
uh,
please.
I you know I I'd be remiss if I didn't say nothing is better than being an entrepreneur, but when you choose to go down that path is important.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, if you can do that, the day after you get your diploma, more power to you. But I don't think, unless you've got something really special, intellectual property or something,
Right.
and there are people like that, I'm sure, but unless you're one of those, get some experience. I mean, it's never going to be wasted.
True.
Um, and But I know some people just don't want to wait. They've got an idea and they feel like
Just go.
5 years from now, someone else is going to take that idea, and they could be right. I'm not here to tell them they're
Yeah.
wrong, but if you do have the luxury of, you don't have that idea right now, but you want to do that entrepreneurial journey, yeah, go out into the world first. You can
Right.
always leave. You can always leave, but the more
That is
experience you
true.
get at some point, don't spend 40 years there like me. Don't even
Yeah.
spend 15 years there like me.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, if you can find work in the general area that excites you in terms of entrepreneurism,
Right.
more power to you. If you can get some experience in the same field.
Right. Because then you can learn from that. One of the
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
best piece of advice I ever got from one of my professors, who was also a mentor to me throughout college, was he said, if you want to learn how to like model the best, or you want to learn how to become the best in X industry, whatever industry excites you as an entrepreneur, go find the company that's doing the best in that industry, and you will never learn more than working on the inside of that company. Like just like you're saying. And then whenever the moment is right to say, all right, I'm taking that leap, I'm jumping into the entrepreneur space,
Yep.
now you'll have learned so much because of the experience that you had kind of on the inside. So
Exactly. Exactly.
um
Exactly.
so I guess I would be curious, Paul, if people want to get more info on you, if they want to see what you're up to with Pulpworks and everything you're doing there with the new company, where's the best place people can go to find more info on you?
Um, well, I mean, obvious. I mean, you can Google my name.
Yeah.
I've made it a I've made it a, I guess, a strict rule. I've never Googled myself. I just don't want to
Nice.
see. I don't want to see what's been said. I mean, I'm
It's
sure
good.
most of
It's good. I was
good.
Googling it earlier. There's good
Okay,
stuff
good.
up there, Paul.
I've never Googled myself, but you can Google my
Yeah.
name, or better yet, Google my company, Pulpworks. There's a lot about Pulpworks. Or go to our web. Well, Googling it will give you our website, of
Yeah.
course. And there's a lot on our website about environmental packaging and replacing plastic and doing all the good things like that. Yeah, I welcome people, and then reach out. We have on our website, you can send a message and reach out and tell me you heard me
Yeah.
on finding direction, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that'd be great promotion for your podcast.
Love that. So I have two final questions. One I ask
Sure.
every guest. One I'm just curious for you is like, if someone's listening to this, what would you say is one thing they can do to reduce their waste? Because I know you're in the space of, helping people reduce their waste. And so what would you say is like something as an everyday person that we could do as individuals to reduce waste?
Well, I mean, because of the nature of my business, Pulpworks, where we not always, but we attempt to replace plastic packaging. I mean, if a client comes to us with a new package that's never been plastic, that's great, of course.
Right.
But when they come to us with a package that's plastic and they're anxious to convert it to something that's compostable, I mean, that's when we're happiest, because
Yeah.
that's one thing I would say that, and I know this from my experience in the consumer goods industry before I launched my business. If you buy something and it's obviously overpackaged, plastic waste, etc., complain. Complain to the retail store,
Hmm.
but better yet, complain to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And people do listen to their consumers.
Hmm.
People listen to their consumers. Consumers can make a difference. I know one of my last positions, I worked. It was an open office, and the consumer relations group was near me. They were taking calls all day from angry consumers, and they
Dang.
listened, and they
It would
would
really change
share.
stuff in the company.
If they heard the same complaint coming back over and over again, they would bring that up at meetings, and yeah, it matters. So
Love that. That's
don't,
awesome.
yeah, don't. I mean, aside from you know good habits at home or whatever in terms of recycling, or I think you can make the biggest impact if you can get to change companies' behaviors. And that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Complain about over packaging or
Love it.
single use packaging.
Right. Heck yeah, I love it. So then last question I have for you, Paul. I ask this to
Yes.
everybody that comes on the show because we're about helping people find direction, but
Yes.
ultimately doing it through action, right? Not just sitting and wondering, but taking action. And so I would be curious, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this right now can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction?
Wow. I wish you had prepped me on that. I could have given more thought.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it can be, it doesn't, to give you some time to think about it. It can be, to help people find direction in the next couple months or to find direction in the next year, not necessarily finding direction on, the rest of their life, but even
yeah.
just, the next month or couple months or year.
It's kind of I guess, I didn't have a lot of time to refine my answer, and it's kind
Yeah.
of a global answer, but
Yeah.
um, get get some feedback from others, not necessarily friends and family. Wherever it is you think you're heading or something, talk to people, get some feedback, get a lot of feedback. You may change your mind on a particular company. I've always wanted to work for National Geographic.
Yeah.
Get some feedback. I mean, aside from publishing incredible magazines and video content, it may be a dreadful place to work. I doubt if that's the case, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna get trashed by National Geographic.
Not at all.
Um, get some feedback about what it's like to work there, and there's even websites where you can get feedback, but
Yeah, there is.
uh, yeah, Glassdoor I think is one of them.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
but if you can talk to people, get informational. I have a friend who always, I have to laugh every time I hear her saying it. She's always doing these informational interviews, finding out what is it about working at such and such a place that really turns you on and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Talk to a lot of people. This goes this goes for anything that you're planning to do, whether it's your first job or
Yeah, I love that.
you're launching a company. Um, People don't like getting feedback because it's apt to make them change their mind.
Right.
But you have to get into a mindset and realize that if you get powerful feedback, and yes, it does make you change your mind, your direction, it's for the better. It's
Yeah.
for the better. I'm sorry if your plans are upended. You always wanted to do that, but people are telling you don't. That would be a mistake.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like, especially with the internet today, if you want to go work for some company or you have a dream to, you have so many ways that you can find people that work for it, whether it's LinkedIn, like there's so many things out there where
Absolutely.
you can
Absolutely.
interact with these people and really get an idea before you actually get there. So,
Absolutely.
um,
And I think
I love that.
you'll get candor too. Not everyone, but you'll get
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of candor. Yeah. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. Just a wealth of knowledge, and thank you so much for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been a great experience. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.